Hi, I'm Ed. Welcome to Common Sense.
And I'm John. How are you doing, Ed?
I'm good, John. How about yourself?
Doing well, surviving the summer.
Well, we got some heat up here in New England, but probably not as much as you guys have in Texas.
Well, it sounds like we're about the same. You might as well just switch places.
Well, I can't imagine coming into work without air conditioning. I mean, when I try to turn it off or keep it lower, and my hands stick to the papers on the desk, it drives me nuts. So we're kind of pampered, but we're getting along.
Jeez. All right, so today we're going to talk about buyer intent data. And it's funny, Marketunist, I don't know if everybody's aware of that site. You should check it out if you're
It's
not.
awesome. That weekly email makes me laugh.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Anyway, they've had some great cartoons lately, poking fun at CMOs and the other marketers who are chasing the latest SaaS products and the hottest tools out there. And the point, of course, is that technology is great, but unless you're really applying the core functions like generating leads, PR, product marketing, and sales enablement, your efforts may not be so effective. It's much more fun way of saying it than I just said. But anyway, so you've been talking about buyer intent data in some of our other sessions, and that's a tool, as I understand it, that may be closer to really a core function than a shiny gadget. So, we've talked about it before, but tell our viewers what exactly buyer intent data is, and what are the benefits and some of the use cases.
All right. Well, when you flip my switch on this, I could talk for a long time about it. So let me break it up into chunks. You ask me some questions, and if I'm running too long, you just kind of shut me up. But I think your characterization of it is essentially right, because it is a technology-enabled tool, but it really feeds the very traditional kind of basic sorts of revenue growth functions. In the world of marketing today, there's really two modalities. If you're talking about generating leads, there's outbound prospecting, and there's inbound marketing. And the growth of inbound, that process that lets folks find you when they're interested, has been amazing. I mean, it's completely changed marketing, and many of the people we know in our marketing community are through HubSpot and through the inbound marketing space. But it's also enabled the growth of HubSpot and a lot of other technology companies. I mean, it's what gives Scott Brinker his chart that gets bigger and bigger, or the logos get smaller and smaller every year. So, as great as inbound is, the thing is, there's some gaps in it. Statistically, let's say you do a lot of great work, you rank for a keyword somewhere number 1 to 3, you've got a strong organic click-through rate on that keyword of, say, 30%. When visitors come to your site, you've got a strong B2B conversion rate of maybe 5% visitors to contacts. That means at that point, you've only got 1 or 2% of the people that were searching for that term. There's 98 or 99% that you haven't gotten. There's still many more than companies got in the past with just a contact us form and a static website, but there's a lot more out there. And then there's people that are looking at your competitors too. And so the bottom line, there's a lot of leads that you don't know about. And what buyer intent data does is uses an algorithm that watches activity around the internet. It filters it according to your ideal buyer profile, title, business size, industry, that kind of thing, location. And it gives you a report when there's matching activity. So it gives you a list of contacts, including contact details of people that have taken action anywhere on the internet related to your key search terms or your competitors or influencers or industry events. So, to kind of say it differently, every salesperson I've ever talked to says, if we're at the table, we win more than our fair share of the deals. Now, some of that may be overconfidence, but everyone says it. And so the key is knowing what tables you ought to be at and getting yourself there. That's what buyer intent data does. Now, let me just ramble one more second because there's a lot of stuff out there that goes under the title of buyer intent data. And there's actually there's an important distinction that's worth understanding. There is stuff out there that's IP based. So in other words, some providers watch an IP address. Let's say, for instance, that you're selling IoT related products and you sell to heavy manufacturers, heavy equipment that's remotely operated. You sell through the CTO. So you might say, I want to talk to the CTO of Caterpillar because I know he would love to know about my product. So you might ask buyer intent data to watch Caterpillar and see if the CTO is taking action. Well, what IP data is going to do is watch Caterpillar locations, see if anybody, any computer in any of those locations takes an action like what you're describing, then they're going to report it back to you, and they're going to pull the CTO's contact details from an unrelated source, Sales Navigator or something, append them to that, and send it to you, pretending as though that's the person who was looking. Now, there's a 1 in 96,000 chance that that is the person who's looking. Like Caterpillar's got 96,000 employees or something like that. So, potentially it might be the CTO. There's a much bigger chance it's not. But they don't tell you that. They send you that as though that's who was looking. So it's really important to understand what I would say real buyer intent data, which is what we're going to talk about, is very different. It's the actual contact. And that becomes really important, when you're talking about ABM and some of the other things we're going to talk about.
So in other words, if everyone had their own IP address, it might work, but they don't at Caterpillar. And so...
And among those other 95,900 people are a bunch of folks, good, hardworking people, but irrelevant to you when you're talking about selling your IoT stuff.
Right. It's somebody who probably has the job of doing research online, for various things.
And that's not bad. In many cases, you want to capture those as well. Mm-hmm. But if it's, the student who's there doing an internship, but using their time to research for the paper they're writing or whatever, you don't care to know about that. So, there's a lot of science that goes into picking the right ones. The point is you want the actual contact details for the person that's doing the search. Then you can decide if it's relevant.
Cool. Okay, so you mentioned ABM, which is one of my favorite things, new shiny things. What can buyer intent data do for people who do ABM?
Well, there's, I think a few things that it does. Obviously it supplements by helping to uncover the other 98 or 99% of the searches that are going on. But more than just kind of LinkedIn Sales Navigator or, a company's website you can go to and do some research, you want to find out who's actually engaged, not just who theoretically might be part of it, but who's engaged. So buyer intent data can indicate that. It also can provide complex deal intelligence. So, there's some of these are a little bit outside of the ABM world. It's kind of in addition to ABM. But in a world where there's 6.8 buyers participating in a complex deal, what competitors are they looking at? Who's part of that buying team that you didn't know about? What functions are participating and what are their hot buttons that they're looking at? Who's looking at competitors' websites? Who's interacting with them on their websites, with their content on social? And it's not just prospects. A big application, a big use case of buyer intent data is watching customers and minimizing churn and enhancing loyalty. If you see somebody that's bought from you for a number of years, suddenly poking around, interacting with a number of competitors, the red flag ought to go up. Geez, there's something going on. I got to dig into this. Customer service people or salespeople. It also can do a lot in terms of nurturing and the sales process. If you could see, who over time, consecutively over multiple time periods, that matches your custom, your perfect buyer profile is searching, then it's a great opportunity to begin to nurture them with Facebook ads, for instance, as part of a custom audience. And it's a perfect list to give to your BDRs. Now they're focused on the real market rather than some kind of a hypothetical. You can also use it to validate market assumptions, which hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about a little bit later. It's great for general industry intelligence. I actually have clients that use it where we can see something going on where we look at where we believe we're seeing a private equity or an investment bank sort of a person poking around and looking at different players in an industry. Now, does that tell us exactly who's getting ready to get bought or who's trying to sell? No, but we can begin to, we're aware that something's going on, and we can begin to draw some inferences. And it's also a great way to supplement target account sales practices. You may have a long list of target accounts. You may or may not be using ABM with them, but when you see a target account suddenly active, you can engage appropriately. And I've actually seen a number of clients identify new target accounts they hadn't thought of because of activity they saw on buyer intent data.
So that made me think of a quick question I'm sure everybody asks. What kind of data is in buyer intent data? Are there phone numbers, emails? What kind of contact information would a BDR have access to?
So the way we deliver it is first name, last name, job title, company, email address, phone number, location, and then information on why the algorithm picked it up, company size, industry, et cetera, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different value there, whether you're in marketing or sales. Some people say, well, is it a marketing tool or is it a sales tool? Well, it's both. The answer is yes, right? It is both. How you use it depends on the use case. But it can also be used outside of marketing and sales. It can be used for corporate development. If you're looking for acquisition candidates, and you can see some of the activity they're doing or activity they're having done around them. It can be used for management insights and for customer service. One of the really cool things about this is its potential to actually help facilitate sales and marketing alignment. I'm actually talking at Inbound about buyer intent data and how it does that. It lets you really, with that set of common data, you can kind of encourage the best of both of those silos to collaborate in ways they might not otherwise. One misconception, though, that it's really important often to get out of the way up front. People sometimes assume that just because somebody's on a buyer intent data list, that means they've written the purchase order, it's in your name, all you got to do is call up and they're ready to send it to you. And obviously that's not the case. These are sales leads, and whether you're approaching it from a marketing or sales angle, you still have to follow the process. I mean, there's a process that you follow to nurture inbound leads. You've got a sales process for your BDRs to follow. You got to have good email templates and good scripts and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you still have to sell these, but these are people that we know are actively buying.
So we talked a bit about complex sales and how this is such a great fit for that, including ABM, but including all kinds of more conventional complex sales. Is this a good fit for really any B2B company, or are there other criteria that you might use to look for fit?
So number one, it is for B2B. It's not for B2C. And number two, it's easy to say, yeah, it can work for any B2B, and it's true. It can. However, I think there's certain criteria that are important for a company to know that it's going to be able to maximize the value. They got to have marketing. They got to have BDR, SDR function. They have to have sales teams. That BDR, SDR function is really important. I've seen cases where somebody just wants to hand a lead list to the field sales, and it just doesn't get followed up on very well. They have to have a culture of nurturing, and they have to have clear sales processes in place. And sales processes, not just that were written in 1983, but that are continuously refined and improved. There's got to be accountability. People have to know that leads are going to be followed up on, because it's easy to provide a bunch of wonderful leads. If nobody follows up on them, there's no value. There's a cost to do it, and so in many cases the ACV, or the transaction value, if it's over $5,000, that tends to be a better fit. In certain cases it can be less, but it tends to be better if it's 5,000 or more. Companies should have a clearly defined buyer persona or ideal client profile that lets them focus and be very clear which leads they want, and helps the machine learning build properly. And they have to have a budget. They got to be in a position to run some custom audience Facebook ads, to run some ABM, to invest in some high quality copywriting, to make sure that the email templates and their sequences are good, and they have to invest in scripts to test them and compare them. So those are some criteria that I think will absolutely help a company know that it's a great candidate for it, and they won't get buried, and they'll be able to optimize the outcomes.
So it sounds like it's not just data, it's really almost a service in itself. You really have to think about your sales and marketing process and alignment and all that sort of stuff in order to really get the value out of it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I think that part of what happens often when we start delivering buyer intent data is we uncover some gaps in marketing nurturing, or in email marketing, or in Facebook ads, or in the sales process. So there's often some discomfort that comes with that awareness, but it's also an opportunity to improve those parts of a program.
So you mentioned a variety of use cases beyond just lead generation. What are some others that really might be interesting?
So we already touched on some of them, obviously the deal intelligence, and we talked about ABM. It's easy in some cases for sales teams or companies to bring the data in, hand it to the sales team, and let them cherry pick some key leads. And, some do that successfully, and they're quite satisfied with it. And some of the leads are really amazing. When you see a target account interacting with a competitor late in a deal, it's an opportunity you don't want to pass up, and you wouldn't know about that otherwise. So it can work for that. ABM is a great example of how it can be worked into the process. And I think that for companies with complex sales processes, it is really effective. One of the biggest challenges in complex sales, Bob Apollo writes about it all the time, is how do you really understand all the players and all the factors at play and who's thinking what and what's going on? Well, is this a panacea for that? No, of course not. But you get a lot of really important data that you can begin to weave together like an intelligence analyst and start to figure out some of what's going on, who the other players are, what they're worried about, how that buying team is working together and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the things that frustrates people about ABM is all that information. You really need that in order to pursue a target account.
Right.
They don't know how to get it. So this really may help those efforts.
Exactly, right.
Yeah. So I read in one of your recent blog posts about using buyer intent data with trigger moments. What exactly were you talking about?
So let's see, how would we describe it? At its most simple, a trigger moment is the moment at which something happens that prompts action. For instance, like let's say you're nearing 50 employees and you know that as soon as you hit 50, you're going to be subject to all kinds of additional regulatory and reporting requirements. So, when you're at 47 and you float the rec for your 48th employee, you're thinking, geez, I got to find a different benefits administrator, payroll partner, whatever the case may be. So that's a trigger moment when you say, I'm almost at that 50, I got to do something. You can kind of visualize it. If you think about the inbound marketing process, you've got the awareness and the consideration and the decision stages in the process, or even I love the way Adele Ravella builds her persona. She starts those qualitative conversations with, take me back to the moment that you first decided you needed to work on this. That's that trigger moment. Now, those happen along the way. There's trigger moments at each stage in the buying journey. Mm-hmm. If you look at that, if you're willing to be a customer-focused business and not just yammer about your stuff, but think about those moments and issues and fears and considerations along the way that trigger different reactions and activities in that buying journey, those are great spots at buyer intent data. When you start to search for those kinds of triggers and terms and stuff, you'll find people that are experiencing those trigger moments, which is a great time to engage with them. It's so much different than some sort of a list of leads that you buy, arbitrarily. Is one of these people, do they just happen to be thinking about this, as opposed to a list of people that meet your ideal client profile who are taking action and are thinking about this.
Yeah, it really does provide context, which is something you can't get, in a rented list. So
right.
I've also heard you talk about using buyer intent data to check your market positioning. How exactly would you do that?
So this one may make some of our listeners squirm a little bit because, the premise that the market positioning isn't ideal may make some people uncomfortable. But let me approach it a different way. What happens if you invest in buyer intent data and you don't see a boost? Now, it's easy to blame the data. The question is, should you? They teach pilots when you're in a cloud and you feel like you're upside down, look at your instruments, because you got to trust your instruments when you don't have another frame of reference. So is it possible that maybe the marketing or the sales process isn't as robust as you thought it was? Or is it possible that maybe you're not targeting the right market? A great example can be, and we've seen this with buyer intent data, where a company says, we've got a great SMB solution, and they market the hell out of it to SMBs. They try to sell it to SMBs, and they just don't have traction. But by chance, they start to realize, looking at the data, that enterprise customers are a much better fit for it, or vice versa. So it could be that you learn that, the market it's a different market than you thought it was. But it could also be that maybe your marketing materials or your sales enablement or your sales process aren't as good as you think they are. I mean, if you've got a good product and service, if you're delivering value to people, and if you're targeting the right kinds of people, the right persona and the right business, then the buyer intent data will give you a control group, because these are people that fit those criteria that are actively searching. So, not to overdo the analogy, but it's kind of like fishing in a barrel. I mean, I don't want to mislead people about how easy it is. You still got to sell the leads, but these are people that are buying, that are the right kinds of buyers from you. Mm-hmm. If in that situation, you're not really nailing it, then there's something that's missing. And so it's a great opportunity to step back and look at whether, maybe it's the marketing, maybe it's the sales process. So really what buyer intent data can do is, by giving you that control group, it gives you an opportunity even to run it in parallel with your regular lead gen. So if you have a couple marketers, a couple BDRs, a couple salespeople that you can carve out to do a kind of a parallel real world test with your traditional lead gen and your buyer intent data lead gen, then you'll have a very clear example of how the two compare.
Or maybe an example from your world, maybe you're not selling in the right country, that your buyers are in Brazil, not in the United States, you might not realize that.
Yeah. And incidentally, the buyer intent data, we can pull from various markets around the world, or we can focus it just on US or North America or whatever.
Cool. So along those lines, if you do run it in parallel with more traditional sales and marketing, say in an experiment, what kind of results are you seeing?
So, you got to have the standard disclaimer. Every company's results are different, and it depends on your market and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, by way of example, for companies that have done it the way I described, where they break it apart, they've got one group that works on buyer intent data leads and one that works on their traditional leads, we've seen close rates improve by 50%. We've seen sales cycles accelerate by as much as 82% in some cases.
That's amazing.
But at the end of the day, a lot goes back to fit. I mean, if companies just have a field sales team, it's going to be a heavier lift than if they've got a robust marketing and BDR team that can kind of pick it up as a package, do the nurturing, develop those leads, and hand them off to sales.
Okay, so circling back to the start of our conversation, let me see if I got your drift, so to speak. This is a product of technology, analyzing millions of online actions and transactions by a group of targeted buyers. And that's a capability that really just didn't exist a couple of years ago. But it's not about a new shiny app, it's not about a tool. It's really about enriching your feedstock of marketing and sales process, your leads, and making them more qualified from the get-go, and also helping them along, which should augment traditional lead generation and analytics.
I think you're absolutely right. And that's also part of the reason we've made a deliberate decision not to package it with some kind of a fancy app and not to have a fancy GUI. All of Scott Brinker's apps are gorgeous when you look at them, but people can often get focused on the wrong thing. So we actually deliver a spreadsheet every week. It's specifically designed to just be an input to the smart, capable teams that are out there that are doing marketing, that are doing sales, that just need that boost of having the information on, who the actual buyers are with the contact data, not this kind of charade like happens with IP stuff sometimes.
So it's very flexible. You could just use it as a call list, but you could also import it into marketing automation and CRM and use all the technology you want to
import it into your ABM tool, create a custom audience for Facebook nurturing and conversion ads. You absolutely use it in a lot of ways. And in fact, the most successful companies use it in multiple ways in parallel.
Cool. Well, it's been real interesting for me. And where can people find out more about this?
Yeah, it's so I've enjoyed this. Obviously, it's a little bit different than our normal conversation where we tend to debate each other, but it gives me a chance to ramble, and so I appreciate that. If you're interested in learning more, the best place to get it is to go to www.salesfrackingdata.com. So again, that's salesfrackingdata.com. You can think of the name, like fracking technology. As I've described, it's designed as a tool to help you get more from, those teams and processes that you already have in place. So salesfrackingdata.com.
But it's illegal in some states. I'm just kidding. That's an oil and gas joke right there. So anyway, we'll wrap up there. And thanks again for joining us.
Let me just add, though, I mean, it is fully GDPR compliant, and some folks do ask about regulatory issues. It's completely compliant.
All right, cool. All right, well, I'll wrap up there. Don't forget to check out our new book, which is at www.commonsenserevenuegrowth.com. I'm John.
And I'm Ed, and together we're Common Sense.